All right, I'm Mark Godsey. I'm a professor here and director of the Ohio Innocence Project. And we have a couple people I want to introduce here before we get started. We recently formed an advisory board for the Innocence Project. We have a couple members here, Kathy Brinkman and John Isidore. They're going to be doing a lot in the future helping us sort of take this thing to the next level. So everybody give them a And also we have Phil Locke, who is a scientist who's done a lot of volunteer work for us. Whenever we have an interesting case that involves anything from arson to medical evidence like shaken baby syndrome, or even photogrammetry, all these different sciences, we give it to Phil, and he breaks it apart and puts it back together and tells us what we need to do. So we're very appreciative. Thank you for being here today, Phil. This event is sponsored both by the Ohio Innocence Project and the Criminal Law Association. So thank you, Criminal Law, I think it's Society, right? Am I getting the name right? Criminal Law Society for co-sponsoring this event. I'm going to introduce our speaker, Scott Bresler, here in just a second, but I just wanted to give a little bit of a preface. The Innocence Movement started about 20 years ago with the advent of DNA testing. DNA testing was used to look into old cases of people in prison who claimed innocent, to determine one way or another whether they're actually innocent or guilty. And in the 20 years since it started, now more than 1,200 people have been identified innocent, exonerated, and released from prison. You can't really avoid turning on the news and seeing, it seems like every other week somebody's walking out of prison after being proven innocent by one of the Innocence Projects. And we've had here in Ohio, in our 10 years of existence, 16 people released on grounds of innocence who together served almost 300 years in prison for crimes they didn't commit. But I think that people look at the Innocence Movement and they say, it's about the anguish of being wrongfully convicted and the joy of actually finding an innocent person in prison and getting them released, and that's very true. And that's a very powerful thing when that happens. But one of the most lasting contributions, I think, of the Innocence Movement is going to be that it is going to make great advancements in the field of psychology. Because we had, like, for example, the space shuttle program, and then we had this terrible disaster with the space shuttle, and at that time we stopped and we did studies, we tried to figure out what went wrong, and we learned a lot more about the space shuttle than we did before because of the disaster that happened. And in many ways, the discovery of all these wrongful convictions in our system is causing us to look at the system, and it's causing people like Dr. Scott Bresler to take a look at these cases and say, what the hell went wrong? How are we convicting all these innocent people? And what we're discovering is that we're learning a lot more about human psychology and human error that I think are going to relate to all different types of society, from criminal justice systems to just your interpersonal reactions with other people. We're learning that human memory is much weaker and malleable than we thought it was. That people are not very good at actually determining whether someone else is telling the truth. We think we can look at their movements and their eye contact and things like that and determine whether they're telling the truth or not. We're actually learning that that's a flawed premise. Another thing that we've learned is that people confess to crimes they didn't commit at a greater rate than we would ever imagine. And that's kind of hard to wrap your mind around. I used to be a prosecutor, and I participated in many interrogations myself. And I think when you're in the process, you can't imagine that someone who's innocent would confess to a murder if they didn't commit the murder. I mean, why in the world would they do that? But it's turned out to be one of the leading causes of wrongful conviction. And even though it's, you're more susceptible to a false confession if you are mentally infirm or you're a juvenile, there are many, many cases of educated adults who weren't subjected to torture, just regular U.S. type interrogations, who falsely confessed to crimes they didn't commit. So Dr. Bresler is going to talk about that phenomenon, specifically in the context of a particular case that he worked on. He is assistant professor of clinical psychiatry here at UC, clinical director of the Risk Management Center in the Division of Forensic Psychiatry, and director of inpatient psychology at University Hospital. He got his PhD from Georgia State University, but he's actually become one of the leading expert witnesses and commentators on the phenomenon of false confessions in the United States. And in fact, he has been an expert witness for us in some of our cases. And even though he's at UC, we'll kick a case over to him and take a look at this, and he'll say, I don't think this guy falsely confessed. We have a hard time with it. We need to work on him a little bit, make it a little more Innocence Project friendly. But he has, I'm kidding. He has ended up testifying for us in a couple cases, including the case of Glenn Tenney. And that was a case of a mentally ill man who falsely confessed to a murder that he did not commit. And based largely on Dr. Bresler's testimony, Tenney was exonerated and released from prison, although that is now currently on appeal. The state of Ohio is appealing that. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Scott Bresler.
Thanks, Mark. May the 9th, 2006. Dad and Mom, hi guys. How are you doing this evening? The letter is filled with lots of spelling errors. I'm hanging in there the best I can. Just wanted to write you guys a quick note, thanking of you guys for everything you are doing for me while this thing is going on. I just don't know what I would do without your prayers, help, support, and love. I would go nuts without you guys. There's no other way of putting it. I've just been doing a lot of praying, Bible studies, reading, writing, and sleeping, and also a lot of thinking. And all this usually makes my day. I really enjoy you guys coming to see me on Mondays and Wednesdays. This is my highlight of the week. I have no way of thanking you for this. I'm not sure how long it will take to resolve this matter. I hope not too many more months. I know, like Dad said, we have to go by the law. I'm still very afraid that my future looks pretty dim in my eyes. I really need some reassurance from you guys. Please, I try to think positive, but it's really hard on me. Mom, I'm very sorry that Andy, Tammy, and Steve are not talking to you. These are family members of the decedents who you're going to learn about here, the people that were murdered. They must honestly think I did this. You guys know damn well that I had nothing to do with this. Please believe me when I say that this is the truth. I thought from day one of this mess that the guys were pinpointing me, the guys being the police. When they took me to Plattsmouth, that's in Nebraska, I really thought I would be back home in a few hours. So during the test, that's the polygraph he's talking about, I was not even thinking about the test. I was thinking about what I was going to do at home that evening. Then the test started, and my answer was no. Not only no, but hell no. Then they said I failed, and that I was either there or I was the one who did it. I was in such a state of shock, I didn't know how to react. Then I had two guys sitting on both sides of me, just screaming at me, saying my ass is grass, and they were the lawnmower. I was so scared, and I just was not thinking straight, and did not know what to do. And they would not let me make a phone call to call you guys. I was under so much stress and pressure, so I fell to pieces. So not knowing what to do, I said I did what I did not do. And now my life is a total mess, and still don't know how to feel or act. And this is still a shock for me. I just hope my lawyer can get me out of this mess. I pray to God she will be able, and it will be a miracle and a blessing if she can. That's part of a letter, one of a number of letters written by the man who I evaluated some years ago, who was sitting in a jail in southeastern Nebraska, primary suspect in a terrible double homicide of his aunt and his uncle. And you're going to learn about that here momentarily. Matt was terrified in prison, in jail, awaiting actually. He was difficult to evaluate, in part because he's mentally retarded. And he went through a bit of a nightmare, and but for excellent police work that was done by a couple of people in the state patrol in the crime lab, this person would have likely gone to prison for the rest of his life, probably not killed, although keep in mind that Nebraska is a capital murder state where they still have the death penalty in place.
Douglas County's chief crime scene investigator David Kofo's fate is in the hands of a Cass County judge. Kofo's accused of murder.
My name's David Kofo. Today is the day that the judge is going to render a verdict in my state trial for tampering with evidence.
Kofo is accused of planting blood evidence that led to the wrongful arrest of 2 men who spent months behind bars being cleared of any wrongdoing.
I feel like I haven't proved my innocence instead of the state proving my guilt.
His attorney claims it was an accidental case of cross-contamination. The judge's verdict will be announced in just over an hour.
This kind of scrutiny is beyond anything I can imagine.
A sensational murder case gone wrong. Detectives jumped to the wrong conclusion.
There was an immediate focus on law enforcement, and that was innocence.
An innocent man confessed to murder. Only a lucky break revealed the biggest clue.
We did a good job with this case.
If there was more cost to this, it was questions.
Police didn't believe the real killers.
The only point here, I don't know what you want. I'm not right.
The state's most prominent crime scene investigator accused of faking evidence.
It was phony evidence this defendant created because this defendant likes to keep the guilty.
Today, a judge will decide David Kofo's lying, but that is only a fraction of the story. This case was police procedure, out in public, and on trial. Past couple of years, surprised Nebraskans watched as 2 major false confession cases hit the headlines. In the first one out of Beatrice, 6 people were released from prison after 20 years. DNA evidence revealed their confessions didn't hold up. And there's this case out of Cass County. For the past year, NET News reviewed thousands of pages of documents, attended court hearings, and spoke with people directly involved. Many of the major players are tied up in lawsuits and wouldn't speak with us. So we relied on the public record to piece together the story of the murder investigation and put the investigators on trial.
That was a fun factor. Good for values. Charmin, she must have heard. Wayne was my brother-in-law. Wonderful people. They cared about family and friends. They were respectful. They just had a lot of things that I think a lot of people respected their environment. They deserve to be here. To lend an ear or to provide a laugh or to provide a hug for their kids and their grandkids, and that pisses me off. Even today, they deserve the chance. They should have been able to live out their lives and work together.
The Sheriff's Office received a call, a 911 call. The son of the people living in the residence called him and sending the rescue squad.
Police reports filed by the Cass County Sheriff's Department only hint what shocked the investigators when they arrived at Wayne and Sherman Stokes' farmhouse the day after Easter.
How did this happen? Why did this happen? Total state of confusion. Everybody's looking for answers.
Odd luck. Again, we don't know if it's somebody local. We don't know if it's somebody driving through.
With little experience working big cases, rural Cass County called in the Douglas County Crime Scene Investigation from Omaha under the command of David Copeland.
I don't think this would be an area, I think it was better than most of the people around, mostly because I just couldn't get enough of it. I really enjoyed the work itself.
So it was basically a cold case of this. A whodunit homicide.
Veteran cop Don Bays was codes number 2 for CSI unit.
Wayne Stokes was adjacent to the bed, near the door, and partially outside the door, as if he were trying to get away. Sherman Stokes was on the bed. She was trapped, trying to get away from the wall.
It appeared that possibly she was trying to make a phone call. There was a phone that was there off the hook that was right next to her.
The crime scene diagrams were the responsibility of investigator C.L. Bresler.
I was assigned to process several possible points of entry into the house. There was a window that led into the laundry room, and that the screen had been removed and it was sitting on the ground next to the window.
It was a scene where, it was like, wow, that's, was a pretty graphic scene.
Michelle Potter, blood spatter expert, noticed an obvious blood stain halfway up the stairwell.
During the time of bloodshed, there was some object in that spot when the blood was shed, and now it's not there. That would be very significant.
The blood that actually had sprayed and hit one of the suspects also hit the wall behind and left an imprint of that person's body.
Investigators assumed that meant two people had been upstairs. Since no money had been taken, a state police profiler felt the motive might be personal, not robbery. Evidence revealed someone unwelcome showed up at the Stokes long after their Easter celebration. A marijuana pipe lay in the driveway, nearly run over by a sheriff's car.
It was just laying right in the gravel, and there was also a flashlight that was near the marijuana pipe, also on the ground. And I think we all agreed right away that those two pieces of evidence was significant instantly.
A couple days later, the state trooper spotted an engraved gold ring on the kitchen floor that the CSI team overlooked.
Oftentimes, it's the piece of evidence that you don't think at the scene is going to be very important, and it ends up being very important.
Cass County investigator Will Skank became the most important cop on the case, though he'd never had any formal training in investigating homicides. He'd only been part of 2 other murder cases handling minor charges for other officers. Skank wasn't the first choice for the county prosecutor, David Cox. Later, he told an attorney Skank was a bit of a cowboy who would come to his conclusions instead of checking all the facts. Spanning out across Cass County, Skank and other investigators heard from people who knew Wayne and Sherman Stokes best, their family and friends. Skank wrote that one name came up time and again, a nephew. One relative spoke about Matt Livers and an ongoing argument with Stokes over a home. Sharman said Livers would get it over her dead body. Skank said some relatives were certain Matt Livers was responsible for the murders.
At the very beginning of this case, on April 17th, the detectives told me they thought it was Matt Livers. They had a target lock on him.
Matt Livers visited the Stokes on Easter Sunday, just hours before the murders. There hadn't been any problems, but relatives were reminded that he didn't fit in. In Ant told police Matt was slow and different. At 22, he had trouble keeping a job.
He was a disgruntled family member that was maybe going to be cut out of the family fortune or whatever.
hoping to clear his name, Matt Livers agreed to take a polygraph. The polygraph examiner declared Matt Livers showed signs of deception. Earl Skaggs, State Patrol investigator Bill Lambert, returned to talk with their suspect. The officer's tone changed dramatically.
You can't put the machine. It's in your heart. It wants to come out. It wants to come out, but you're around. You've been feeding some shit since the first day we started talking to you. It's time to let it go.
After a full afternoon of intensive questioning, Matt Livers confessed to the murders.
Investigators from the Nebraska State Patrol and the Cass County Sheriff's Office arrested 2 individuals for the homicide of Stokes.
Because of our faith in law enforcement, the way they conducted the investigation, we're thinking, okay, they're the pros.
In his confession, Livers claimed his cousin Nick Sampson provided the gun and the car and helped plan the attack.
Everybody was like, now who's this? I couldn't even tell you who the kid was, even after I saw his picture on the paper.
In custody, Nick Sampson stuck to his story. He was innocent and had never even visited the Stokes home, much less killed the couple. The 2 suspects appeared before a judge even before the CSI lab test confirmed that the evidence supported the sheriff's theory of the crime.
We're not going to rule out that there might not be somebody else.
Out of the 450 items of evidence that we examined in this case, there ended up being 4 things were important, and that was the flashlight, marijuana pipe, the ring, and the shoe that was at the scene.
As the trace evidence expert for the Douglas County CSI, Christine Gabay examined the Murdoch evidence for traces of fabric, hair, or DNA to the killers. The marijuana pipe was a possible source of both DNA and fingerprints.
It's basically similar to what military might use to pick up UV light. And then I swabbed the mouthpiece of the pipe thinking that would most likely place with cells for DNA profile.
The flashlight found in the Stokes front yard had small spots of blood on it, the victim's blood. Then there was that ring found by the state trooper in the Stokes kitchen.
I didn't know if someone was wearing the ring or had been carrying the ring in their pocket, and so I wanted to get 2 separate swabs on each area.
The DNA test cleared things up. They created a new mystery and a big problem.
We had the marijuana pipe, the flashlight, the ring. None of the local people's DNA matched those.
We had a bigger question we had to address here. Whose DNA was that?
Police hoped another lead would link their suspects to the crime. They might have located the car used by the killers. The night of the murders, in the back roads of Cass County, a witness thought it odd that a tan four-door sedan being parked by the cemetery near the Stokes home. Turns out Nick Sampson's brother owned a tan four-door Contour. Police seized it after learning it had been cleaned the morning after the murders. The first set of tests revealed nothing, but David Cook took a second look. He produced a tiny trace of blood, Wayne Stokes' blood, under the steering wheel.
The blood that they found in Will Sampson's car was the only evidence during all of our investigation that linked that vehicle and Matt into the homicide.
That didn't sit real good with me or the family because we're thinking, where did this car come from now? And who else may be potentially involved in this?
I don't think it's a dead end at all. I think that just means there's more work to be done. That's where Christine really came through with processing that ring.
They had no fingerprints on the ring because there were markings on it. I thought that maybe somehow I could use those markings to figure out at least who purchased the ring, and then the investigators could take it from there.
Who were Corey and Ryan? The manufacturer stamp on the inside identified a company in New York. Gabe called A&A Jewelers. Amazingly, the day before the company went out of business. A&A sent thousands of these rings to Walmart all over the country. A search of hundreds of paper engraving orders finally located Corey, a woman in Beaver Dam, Wisconsin. Gabe gave her findings over to the Nebraska State Patrol. They tracked down Corey and Ryan.
That ring was purchased in Wisconsin by a woman who had given it to her boyfriend, who had left it in his truck. His truck had been stolen, and the truck was recovered in Louisiana.
The ring had been dropped by Jessica Reed, a 17-year-old girl on a cross-country thrill ride in a stolen red truck driven by Gregory Bresler. Pulling off of Interstate 80, they cruised back roads looking for a farmhouse to rob.
We went around to the back of the house, opened the window, and crawled in.
When she spoke with us and drew her own crime scene diagram, it all seemed to fit the evidence collected by police the day of the murder.
And when I had turned around, Greg had flipped the vision white on, and I had seen a guy, like ice feet or whatever his legs. Was like trying to tell him, let's do something, let's get out of here. And he had turned around and went into the room and shot at the guy. And he was fighting Greg, and the guy looked up at me, and I just fired my gun. I don't know where it went. He fell forward, and Greg jumped over him, shot him in the back of the head. I remember the lady screaming, and I remember him shooting, and then he ran, and I ran after him.
With Livers and Sampson still in jail, Nebraska detectives traveled to Wisconsin, convinced Ms. Stokes were victims of a murder conspiracy now involving 4 people in 2 states. In short order, Greg Fester mumbled through an admission that he had killed the couple. The detectives wanted more. They insisted on knowing how Matt Livers and Nick Sampson were involved. Fester agreed. The more the real killer talked about Livers and Sampson, the more he confused the story and contradicted the evidence. His girlfriend seemed to confound the detectives.
Sure. So I asked him, 2 people upstairs, 3 shot.
And you're saying that Greg died?
I'm telling you, you were telling Charlotte's house. Okay? Did you not tell
I'm not accusing anybody, okay? I really did this so seriously. I told you that they did. I swear to God, I really did this. I don't want to go to jail for murder because we got to do it.
According to Jessica Reed, she was still high from the morning of smoking dope when her interrogation started. Confronted with one piece of evidence after another tying her to the crime scene, Reed finally admitted taking part in the murders.
And all of a sudden, I fell forward, and his brains were splattered everywhere, all over me. And so I went down, and I hurried down, and I turned around, and I ran out of the house.
The description fit the evidence, but it did not include the 2 men already accused of the murder in Nebraska.
Every day you see something like that.
The detectives wanted more.
I was with Reagan. That's all I was. I was with Reagan. I don't know anybody in Nebraska.
Inside the Women's Correctional Center, we showed Jessica Reed the recordings of her own interrogation for the very first time.
I was trying to figure out what they wanted to hear.
If you don't get the death penalty, okay, there's a good chance you'll rot in death row or in maximum security prison until you're ready to take the pass away.
I think I was more scared. And I was more like freaked out. So I was just like, okay, this is cool. We're gonna die now.
Jessica Reed began to go along with the detective's version of the story. They showed her mugshots. The one person she says she would not hang out with was Matt Livers.
I mean, the main picture, it was really weird. but no, never seen her either.
Like, pretty much finally when they were trying to make me say I was in that bedroom, and I killed that lady, I was like, no, I never went into that bedroom, and I never did that. It made me really mad, and it still kind of makes me mad because it's like they just kept pushing me and tell them all this stuff.
The only one there, I don't know any other people. I'm lying. I swear to God, I don't know any other people.
You have a nice restaurant.
No, you
Earl Skank and Bill Lambert would have none of it, believing Reed was protecting the two men locked up in Nebraska. Days later, Jessica Reed still could not convince police that she, Fester, did it alone.
They are not involved with it. Somebody please believe me. Please.
There's too much evidence.
And it was the easiest thing to say because it wasn't true. And if you lie, you have to come up with these different things. You gotta remember what you say. I just didn't want to do that.
Confessing to first-degree murder sent Jessica Reed to prison for the rest of her life. Greg Fester will be locked up just as long.
Fester and Reed should have to be hung by this the rest of their life.
For the relatives of Wade and Sherman Stoke, putting Fester and Reed in jail did not bring an end to this case. It seemed so unlikely that this could have been a random crime. Investigators looked into and set aside every possible link between the killers from Wisconsin and the local suspects, Livers and Sampson. They found nothing.
We have lots of unanswered questions. Why they come to Nebraska, how they come to Nebraska.
Two other men remained in jail because of two other pieces of evidence. The sheriff still had Matt Livers' confession. The CSI unit found Wayne's blood in the getaway car. Solid leads until reasons arose to take a closer look at how the police made their case.
Over the course of this investigation, there have been many twists and turns.
In December 2006, Nathan Cox held a press conference that no prosecuting attorney wants to call.
I've determined the only option, therefore, at this time is to dismiss the charges against both Livers until such time as those inconsistencies are resolved, if they can be resolved.
My life is completely ruined.
Nick Sampson had been released after being locked in isolation for 5 months and 10 days.
It'll break somebody. It will break you in a heart. I'm 21 years old. The second day I was in jail, I was bawling like a 3-year-old.
Now Matt Livers was going home.
Just like Nick, I'm innocent. I had absolutely nothing to do with this.
The children of Wayne and Sherman Stoke watched as the men they assumed were guilty walked out of jail.
We were wondering what's next. It's hard for a wound to heal when it keeps getting reopened. And I'm watching family members go. It was so hard to save people.
Here's what the family didn't know, what even Matt Livers' attorneys had not been told. The prime suspect recanted his entire confession, took it all back.
I've been just making things up to satisfy you guys.
And I think at that point, they really dropped the ball. They really dropped the ball.
Scott Bresler, a psychologist, did a forensic analysis of the entire interrogation. So did 2 other experts consulted by the county attorney. They all reached the same conclusion.
That this, in fact, could be a false confession.
And Livers didn't tell his own attorney.
How come you didn't tell her that you met with police again, and that you told police that everything you told them was not true? And he said, I didn't think it was important to say that to her. He didn't have a clue. He had no clue.
With little experience in investigating homicides, Cass County Deputy Earl Skank was assigned a partner, Bill Lambert of the Nebraska State Patrol. Lambert had a good record of working white-collar crime. He never took a lead in a murder investigation. The detectives had no evidence of putting their prime suspect Livers at the crime scene. Still, the two were confident they had the right man. Bill Lambert would explain later, I don't go after innocent people. The cases I work for, a person that I've investigated is involved in a crime. I just have to prove the crime. To get there, the investigators used a polygraph test to reveal if their person of interest was lying. State Patrol polygraph examiner Charles O'Callahan conducted the examination.
Do you know for sure?
According to O'Callahan, Matt Livers was not telling the truth. 5 years after that polygraph, Matt Livers' attorney made a startling discovery never previously made public. The State Patrol polygraph examiner used that day was still a trainee. O'Callahan had never done a polygraph on his own.
He doesn't have sufficient experience doing polygraph examinations to have a license to polygraph in the state of Nebraska. He's got to be supervised by another more experienced examiner. None of that is revealed to that officers.
An expert on polygraphs hired by Livers' attorneys concluded the style of the questions prepared by O'Callahan were poorly done and influenced the outcome.
In other words, nobody can read this test and determine anything from it as an independent test in the beginning.
An independent expert consulted by NET News for this program came to the same conclusion. The Nebraska State Patrol declined to comment on the polygraph.
And at this point, the interactions with police shift from an interview to interrogation. He's a guy who assumes that the police know what they're talking about and that the police should be obeyed.
Your subconscious mind is telling you you cannot handle it. I didn't have anything to do with this. I'm sorry, you did.
He has made a total of 89 separate denials of involvement in these murders. Most of them have been rejected.
Tell us all.
He kind of hides his face. So I'm thinking what police might be thinking, which is, what has he got to hide? He got kind of beaten down pretty quickly.
In court documents, investigator Lambert insists his only goal was to find out why Matt Livers was withholding information.
And the police have very fine training on how to do these types of persuasive maneuvers in order to get that individual to then leading to them saying something incriminating.
We know the facts of the case. We know who killed these people, okay?
The state of Livers was shock and terror.
What man? Come on. What do you mean not one man?
Matt Livers is a person whose intellectual capacity is only about 1 to 2%.
We've had so many people sitting in that chair, okay? I think that they're smarter than us, and you're not. Okay? No, you're not telling us a brick, okay?
At one point, this very aggressive interrogation, insisting to Livers that he should confess if he has self-respect.
You consider yourself a man. Then stand up. No, stand up, okay? After what you've done.
That's my favorite part. We call that concrete thinking. Okay?
What I'm going to talk to now is very quickly is a little bit about the interrogative process. This example, what we have with Matt Livers in this case is really a perfect storm. What the video goes on to show is we end up having a rogue cop who happens to be the head of the crime lab in this area who plants blood evidence into the car, okay? And that's the piece that's not explained. And the Attorney General said 2 days ago, as a matter of fact, because they just resolved the civil case that was brought against the state patrol, as well as the local police forces, and the local district attorney's office, et cetera, the county, Cass County. The issue was, why did these people stay in jail after you found the true perpetrators of the murder? Okay? And they stayed in for months, and the Attorney General, of course, says, well, the reason why is because we have this rogue cop. And what they did, interestingly enough, his name is Kafoed, they took a defense attorney who is legendary in that part of the country, a guy named Clarence Mock. I've worked with Clarence. He is brilliant beyond brilliant. And they made him into the attorney which pushed for the prosecution of Kafoed. Kafoed was actually found guilty and sent to prison. They did it at the state level and the federal level. The federal level, they did not prevail, but on the state level, they did. And he was sent to state prison for a few months. So what is this interrogative procedure, right, that we're talking about? The one that I'm going to show you, it's the most popular one, is developed by Reed and Associates. It's police agencies all over the United States, Canada, all over the world for that matter, are often trained in this particular interrogative procedure. Just so you know, I have been through this police training and have advanced training as well in police interrogative procedures. They have manuals that the first edition printed in '62, right? But as recently as last year, there's a new one that's out. And what it is it is a way of using a psychological third degree, if you will. By the way, what do we call them? Why do you think we call them third degree? Oh, they gave him the third degree. You have any idea where that comes from? There was a sergeant in New York City, and his last name was Sergeant Burns. Literally is his name, right? And he lived up to his name. He prided himself on being able to always get a confession, right? And of course, he did it through the use of his last name, third degree Burns, right? So giving the third degree. Now, of course, that went out the window years ago, Supreme Court decision, with Mississippi decision, Supreme Court went out the window. Can't use those types of physical measures anymore, but psychologically, police have certain tools that they can use, and they're very effective. Don't think that these tools are not effective. They're very effective. They get lots of guilty people. They allow the criminal justice system to proceed in an efficient manner by getting lots of guilty people to admit that they have committed some type of a crime. And then they allow the resolution of these cases, which of course frees up the dockets in the courts. Okay? Problem is, there is a subgroup of these fish who get caught up in the net. And these people are innocent. Now, do we know what percentage? Are we able to know what percent? By the way, why is it important to know numbers? Why do you think the court wants to know what the percentage is? Anybody in here? No? Because in a Daubert hearing, they want to know baseline data. They want to know who it is. Who are these people? Where are they coming from? What are their percentages? I'd like to know that too. We've got a little problem though. Every time we go and we talk to police agencies, can we do a little research in your backyard about false confessions? You think they volunteer? Hell no. I'm not interested in talking to you about that. So we don't have the baseline data. And even if we did, it probably differs from area to area, depending on the degree of aggressiveness by particular police agencies, right? Now, we do have survey data, interestingly enough. We do have survey data. And police themselves, police detectives, right, themselves will tell you that they see false confessions somewhere between 2 to 4%, let's say, of cases. Tell me, Godsey,
How many criminal cases do we have in this country in a year? You do the math, people. You do the math. How many hundreds of thousands of people are criminally prosecuted, right? Now, most of these people they're going to discover, most of these people tend to be gangsters, gangbangers that are covering from somebody else, or family members that are covering for loved ones, what have you. What do these interrogative procedures look like? They get a suspect after the investigation points to that person. They bring in an interrogator, and hopefully it's somebody who's a skilled interrogator. By the way, it can include a polygraph examiner. And they're allowed to give the polygraph. By the way, if they do the polygraph and they pass the polygraph, are the police allowed to tell them that they failed the polygraph? Absolutely. They were totally allowed to lie, right? And in fact, I have a case that I did, South Dakota v. Dirks, of a young woman who had her own young children in her home. She also took other children in. She ran a daycare. And one of the kids in the daycare got hurt, suffered a brain injury. She was terribly distraught that this happened to this child, was up all night thinking, how could this have happened? Perfect time to do an interrogation when someone is up all night and hasn't slept, correct? They get her into the room to do a polygraph. She tells the polygrapher over and over again, I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened. Feels guilty that she might have had something to do with it. Takes the polygraph, supposedly fails the polygraph, feels terrible. So the polygrapher, experienced police officer, says, I know you feel bad about this. I had a situation once with my grandchild where they were up in the high chair and they fell over in the high chair and on my watch, and he's almost in tears and telling her the story. I felt, why don't you write a note of apology to the family? That this, even though you don't know what happened, can you just write this note of apology? That note of apology, my friends, led to an indictment for a crime that could have sent this woman away for over 20 years. For over 20 years. From the moment that letter was written, the children were removed, handed over to the husband. She couldn't have any contact with the kids, her own children. She was placed in jail. Eventually, she was allowed to get out. I gave testimony in that case. The statement was suppressed. How, I have no idea. Ultra-conservative judge who seemed to be sleeping on the witness stand, in the judge's chair, right? And I'm talking, and this and the other. All of a sudden, he wakes up and he starts pummeling me with questions, shocking both the district attorney as well. It was like, this guy never says anything. All of a sudden, he's, well, tell me what you mean, Doc. Well, how did that happen? I said, Judge, take a look at this tape and look what the polygrapher told her to write. Strangely, it's the exact words that the polygrapher uses that's in the letter of apology. This woman had what's called a coerced internalized confession. At that moment, she came to believe, subjected to the polygraph and told that she had failed it, and that was equivocal. She came to believe that she had committed the crime. If they bring him in and say they can go home later, do they need to give him Miranda warnings? No. Or they set up these rooms where they do these interrogations. They're set up with intention to isolate this person, to let them feel like they're completely by themselves. Interrogation is an accusational interaction with the suspect conducted in a controlled environment designed to persuade the suspect to tell the truth. That's what they say. If you ask a police officer, did you want to get a confession? They're going to say, no. What were you after then? They're going to say, the truth.
So what does it entail? First thing that happens in interrogation is you have what's called positive confrontation. It's a one-way conversation. They're barraging you with information that they absolutely know that you committed the crime. They don't need you to tell them that you committed the crime because they know you committed the crime. They just want to know why. Why do they want to know why? Because if they know why, they may be able to pass that information on to the prosecuting attorney who may take, a little bit of sympathy, take that into consideration when you're prosecuted. Or what have you. Get it off your soul. Stand up, be a man. Right? They develop a theme of the interrogation. This is that monologue that just goes on ad nauseum. And they offer various reasons. You notice in the tape, what were some of the reasons that they said Livers committed the crime? Your family treated you poorly. They saw you as dumb and as an outcast. I'm as dumb as a brick, right? Yeah, he wanted to get one of the farmhouses in this huge area where all the family members live. Of course he did. And yes, it was difficult for him to keep a job. He wasn't the brightest guy in the world, and his frustration tolerance levels were not very high, and people pick on people like that, right? Why did he go with the police? Because he himself wanted to be a police officer. He liked police shows. He was a security guard at the airport. That's sort of like being a police, right? Investigators handle the initial denials of guilt. How? They don't allow it. I didn't. No, yes, you did. I didn't. Yes, you did. They ignore it. They go right through it. And they're taught, quote, the more often the guilty suspect denies involvement in a crime, the less likely it is that he will tell the truth. So don't let him deny. Roll over him. The suspect may have all kinds of objections. And they're taught objections are heard almost exclusively from guilty suspects. At some point, a suspect wants to divert their attention, to go elsewhere. What does he do? Show me what he does. Right now, show me what he does to divert his attention. Thank you. He's an ostrich. That's not a leopard out there. I can't see him. He's not there. So you have to do something to recapture the attention of this now passive guilty suspect. Then they come up with what they call an alternative question. Well, listen, either they did something to provoke you, Mr. Godsey, before you took out the gun and shot him, right? Or you're just a badass evil dude. Which one is it? Can you tell me, Godsey? You are indeed, man. You are indeed. That's why I love you. And then you get the verbal details. And then, of course, if you can get that verbal confession flipped over to a written confession, then you got right there the word, etched in stone. And you proceed from there. And I just wanted to show you this. This was done by one of my students some years ago, Dr. Dimitri Bick, in another case. And it used, what you have is we're tracking over time various types of approaches that the police take during the interrogation, right? So they maximize what's going to happen to you, or they minimize, oh, you were provoked, right? With excuses. We know you really wouldn't have done this in your right mind, right? They manipulate them with alternative questions. They may intimidate them. We're going to hang you from the highest tree. By the way, what did Matt think when they said that we're going to hang you from the highest tree? You know Billie Holiday's song, Strange Fruit, right? You're familiar with a classic song about lynchings in the South, right? He saw strange fruit. He was the strange fruit. Okay?
Yeah, you have about 10 minutes.
Yeah. So, I guess what I want to leave you with here is a few messages. Number one, false confessions occur. We have some sense of why they occur in certain populations of people, people that are vulnerable, like intellectually limited persons, persons with certain types of mental illness that may not be able to take a coercive or highly persuasive, let's just not use the loaded word, a highly persuasive interrogation. They're incapable of doing that. These are people that tend to be placaters, and we can measure their personalities to determine that. We have a test that we use to look at a construct called interrogative suggestibility, whether a person will begin to shift what actually they experience, what they hear, and what they see. When they're confronted, no, you're making mistakes, you're doing it wrong, let's do it again. Okay? There's various different aspects components of a person's psyche, so to speak, that will lead to this kind of a problem of a false confession. But there's also, on the flip side, problems as well. You know, our criminal justice system is set up where we have police that essentially are actively assisting in the prosecution of these people, beginning at the investigation level. There are problems with that. It's particularly problematic if you have a rogue cop or somebody who wants to impress their boss, whoever that may be, to climb up the ladder more quickly. When you get into these rural areas where people leave their keys in the car and their doors open, and this was Murdoch is way off the beaten track, then you really have, you know, an in cold blood Truman Capote type scenario here. And if you never read that book, that's a must-read book. If you want to get a feel of what it's like to be a cop, right, in a small town, and something like this terrible situation happens, you got to read that book. That's a must-read. It's a tense amount of pressure. How did this happen? We're not safe. Everyone's feeling lots of pressure. Everyone's looking for answers. Sometimes those answers are not readily apparent. But for that ring, and the good police work done, making that phone call, listen to the state patrol officer describe that phone call. That ring, I haven't seen that ring since my truck was stolen. What do you mean your truck was stolen? My truck was stolen. I had the ring in the truck. I'd taken it off. It was bothering me. I'd been doing some work. Well, how do you know your truck was stolen? Because they found it down in Louisiana. They found your truck in Louisiana? Yeah, as a matter of fact, one of the guys who stole the truck's still in jail. Oh, he is. But for that ring.
I'll add to that, it's actually unusual. One of the psychological phenomena we see is tunnel vision. After someone confesses to a crime, most of the time, very little investigation takes place. When you study all of these cases, it's actually strikingly unusual that there was someone who continued to run down this lead with the ring. The case would be over, the main evidence would be the confession, everything else would be made to fit that, and it would be the end of the story.
Federal lawsuit was just settled. In fact, Mark wanted to have this go out to other places around the country, and I couldn't do it because I was involved in the federal lawsuit. It settled this weekend. Matt Livers ended up getting 1.65. I would imagine about half of that ended up going to Northwestern Law School, who pursued this case. Steve Drizzen, who I'm hoping will be here later in this year, and if he is, you got to make sure you see him. He is outstanding. Northwestern Law School. Locke Bowman, who I worked with, who's a real brilliant lawyer on issues of civil liberty, on civil liberties and lawsuits. So Drizzen may be here. Sampson also got about $1 million as well. Unfortunately, when you look at what the Attorney General said, John Bruning, the Attorney General, of course, pointed the finger at whom? Cafoid, right? None of this would have ever happened if we didn't have the rogue cop. And there's certainly some truth to that, right? But once again, in the state of Nebraska, they don't have to look at the way that they're pursuing cases. This is not the first murder case that I have been involved in which a person is released. And the largest known false confession case in the history of the United States is the Nebraska case they were talking about earlier, called the Beatrice Six. And it's these 6 people who were in prison for 20 years for a murder they had nothing to do with. And it's never really been written about because it's in the backwoods. Nobody's written a book about it yet, okay? A couple of friends of mine are working on it out there, people that I know, attorneys that I work with, okay? Questions about this, and then you guys got to get out of here quickly. Any questions? Yes.
You said that the interrogation methods are very effective at getting guilty people to confess, but I mean there is also the issue of innocent people falsely confessing. How would you change how they do their interrogation to weed that out?
Okay, so the question, I'll just repeat it. The question is simply, what would you do differently? Okay. Well, first, in terms of the interrogative procedures, so that we don't have many, as many of these types of cases where we have innocent people that end up getting, for whatever reason, coerced into into saying something inculpating criminally. So the answer to that, it's a good question. It's a complicated question. First of all, in this case, just to let you know, in this case. And that's why I said this is where I think they dropped the ball. If you listen to what he said in the interrogation, which it would take a whole semester to go through the whole case. But what he said was factually incorrect. But he had some facts which the police had inadvertently given to relatives, and he was in contact with relatives. So I would ask him, well, how did you know about the marijuana pipe? How did you know, and he says to the cops, he says, and they even have it on tape. He goes, I know about the marijuana pipe. You guys almost rolled over it in the driveway. And the cop sort of stops for a second. How you know that? Mama told me after she talked with Officer so-and-so, right? So you have this pollution going on, right? Where information is being kind of bleeding out. Contamination, if you will, right, of the evidence. Now, they don't use these interrogative procedures all over the place. In Britain, they don't use these interrogative procedures. They use a more open question procedure, right, a much longer procedure. They don't flip into this hardcore confrontative style. Okay. By the way, and they find that it's very effective there. Now we'll have to see. There's a long tradition of using these methods here in the States. What we certainly need to do, first and foremost, is every place needs to be keeping an account, an audiovisual account at best, especially for major crimes. Okay, because this happens over and over and over again. And again, we don't know how prevalent. I see a skewed sample. And by the way, don't think that, for every 10 lawyers that call me and send me tapes, I shoo away 9 of them. No, it's just not here. Sorry. Maybe a false confession, but it's not here, right? Makes God see upset with me, but I can live with that, right? So,
Let me just add that the main thing is videotaping, because a lot of places don't videotape these interrogations. And what comes out of it is, he confessed. This long, complicated thing where you can see this guy suffering and starting to incorporate facts that the cops are giving him into a story just comes out as, he gave this written statement.
Or they turn the camera on. They turn the camera on when the person's ready to confess.
After they've gone through 8 hours of the coaching him to the point where he's going to confess, but it's a false confession. So the main thing is having the entire thing on tape. Because then experts can go through and look for these earmarks of false confession.
And there are a lot of great police officers and people in the FBI that are now strongly pushing that this be done. Other questions? Any other questions? Thanks for your attention, folks.